Hello everyone. I hope everything is great. So in earlier video we learned different input types. As you can discuss in the browser, there are lots of input types available in HTML and we already discussed all of these, right? So today we will discuss the input attributes. Those are available in HTML and by use of these attributes we can customize the different input types. So let's start without wasting time. So here I created this HTML file, which is HTML attributes.html file, and I add different uh, simple this form and as well as few attributes values like value, read only, and disable. And I just open this file here. So first attribute is the value attribute. This attribute we already discussed in the earlier videos, but let's recap this attribute as well. So by this value attribute, user can specify an initial value for the input type, and this can be used with any input type like input type text, password, search, URL, input type submit, input type reset as. Let me give an example. Here I quickly add the label and here I add the input type text and give the ID name. Okay. And in label I give the for attribute and this will be the same as the ID of the input. And here I add this static string. Save this thing, go to browser, refresh, you can see this is input type text field is added in the page. User can add any value from here, right? Okay. But if I give the value attribute here, this in the small and give some default value. Save this, go to browser, refresh, and you can see now this input have this default value, or we can say the initial value, which is the XYZ. From here, user can append the value. He can completely modify this input field value. Okay, and whenever user refresh this page, this input again have the initial value. Same way, you can set the value attribute for input type submit. Here at the end, I add few BR tags that is used for line breaking. And now I add the input type submit and I give the value form submit. Okay, save this thing, go to browser, refresh. You can see by use of this value attribute, we can set the value of this submit button as well, right? So this is all about the value attribute. Let's move to the next attribute, which is the read only attribute. So basically, read only attribute, by use of this attribute, we can specify that an input field is read only. What is the meaning of read only? So when we add this attribute, that input field is not accessible to the user. User can only read this that input and does not modify that value. Let me add here one label read only, right? And I add the input type. Let's use the search and give the ID attribute to reading. When I use this thing, one new input is created here. I add the few BR tags that are added here. I copy these things and paste here so that my button is in the next line. Now I add the attribute read only for this input. Type search, go to here and refresh. So now if user tap on this, user cannot add any value because that cursor is not blink here. When we tap on this input box or focus on this input box, the cursor blinks so that user can add the values. But for this read only input, user cannot edit or modify the this input field value. Now, what is the use of this read only? So when you want to add some input field for which user can read that input field, that this input have this particular value, and but you don't want to modify that value by the user, right? So this type of case you can add this read only input type. What I did, I simply add the value attribute here and give some ID, maybe in this format. Okay, go to here, refresh. You can see this is the value, but user cannot change or delete this value. When the user submit this form, this input value goes with other fields in the form submit, but user cannot modify this value. So this is all about the read only attribute. Next attribute is the disabled attribute. This attribute is almost same the read only attribute but have some difference. Let's quickly copy these two lines just for time saving, and here I made some changes, like instead of reading I add the ID for disable. Copy this and paste in the ID, change the label to disabled, type search, okay, and instead of using the read only I use the here disabled attribute. Save this thing, go to browser, refresh, and you can see the first difference between the read only input and disable input is the design. You can say, see, this input is looking this way and disable input field look this way. Now if user tap on this, this is not, user cannot able to focus on to this, but when user tap on this, user can focus on this input field. And also the value of the disabled input type is not submitted when the user submit the form. So this is only the purpose of displaying the value in the page. This value does not submit when the user submit form, and as well as user cannot modify this value, user cannot even focus on this input field. Same way as we disable this input type search, we can also disable other input types like the button, like the other input type text, password, URL, telephone, email, date time, week, month. All of the input types can be disabled by this attribute disable. Let's use this in this submit button. I simply add this disabled attribute for the submit button. Save, go to here, refresh. You can see the submit button have the same designing that have this input field, and also user cannot click on this button now. This button is disabled for the user. So as we need this button for this form, I remove this attribute from this button here. So now this button is enabled and user can click on this and form, or we can say the page is refreshed, as you can see. So this is all about the disable attribute. Next attribute that we discussed is the size attribute. What is the size attribute? So with size attribute, we can specify the visible width in character form. What is the meaning of that? Let me copy these two lines and remove this disabled, and for disable, instead of for disable, I use for size. Here also use the for size. Change the label size, and I just remove the value attribute here. Save, go to here, refresh. This input box is visible here. Now I add the size attribute and give the value in character form. So now only 5 characters can be visible inside this input box. Let me save this, go to browser and refresh. You can see the size is small than the default size. Now the meaning of this 5 is not that we can only enter the 5 character inside this. We can enter multiple characters inside this input box, but at a time only 5 characters are visible inside this input box. Again, this visibility depend on the fonts that you used for your page as well as the rendering of the browser. Let's assume here if I type the L character, then we can enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 L character. After that, it scrolls, right? And if I enter the character Q or maybe A, 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, only 3 characters we can easily add, and fourth character is in the scroll. So that exact does not mean that depends on the character size and as well as the fonts that you are using in your page as well as the browser rendering. But this will calculate the size in terms of the character. If I add here the at the rate, only 2 at the rates are available inside a single. After that, scroll is added, right? We can give the any number to size. Let me give 50, save, go to browser, refresh. You can see the input size is different than the previous one. So by this attribute, we can set the size of the input and we can specify the size for text, search, password, telephone, URL, email, and password, right? So for this video, we discuss these 4 attributes. In next video, we learn some more available input attributes. If you have any question about these attributes, then comment on this video and we will discuss those comments in next video, or if the answers are small, then I definitely give the response in the comments. If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe my channel. For now, that's all. Goodbye.